everybody, this is Steve Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today, with any luck at all, we shall finish our discussion on emotional intelligence. When last we left our discussions, we were looking at the GENOS list of core emotional intelligence competencies. We were reading their definitions for each of these, and we were trying to see where does this overlay on the ChangeGrid. And so just so it's handy for all of you, I'll go ahead and chat over the link to GENOS's what an explanations, I guess, definitions. And you have it then for whatever reference you want to have. But this is our real goal. Our goal is, again, just to go like, okay, great. GENOS is one of many variations on the field of emotional intelligence. If you went out there and really started doing some looking around, you would find, I don't know, not less than a dozen different companies. In fact, very interesting, if you go and you type in emotional intelligence certification, GENOS doesn't even appear in the first 2 pages of Google results.
Wow.
So, but there's a whole bunch of others that do. so there's certainly plenty of options for anyone who's looking into learning more about emotional intelligence, perhaps even seeking certification in it. So I just wanted to say that so I could say, while we happen to be looking at GENOS's, it's not because there's something particularly, what I want to say, that this isn't necessarily the pinnacle of the subject matter expertise or anything like that. It just happens to be one that we stumbled across that's got some good explanations. So so with that, let's go ahead and get into it. Now, during this discussion, of course, we're going to be bouncing back and forth between this particular little diagram and a ChangeGrid composite diagram. Again, for pretty much everybody on the call, you guys should be fluent enough in all things ChangeGrid to not need to look at it layer by layer, but just see the composite and you can see all the different layers we're talking about. That said, if at any time you go, wait, we got to zoom in on that, I'm more than happy to just pull out one of the layers that we happen to be discussing and see what's going on with emotional intelligence when we're looking at that. Now, I bring that up because lo and behold, someone did ask a question connected to that, and it had to do with emotional intelligence and the engagement rings. So I thought I'd take a few minutes and again, just kind of talk a little bit about how these things might overlay and see what you guys think around this. Now, again, if we go back to the composite diagram, we did say that most of the hallmark definitions of the characteristics, qualities, competencies associated with emotional intelligence tend to live in these 4 sub-quadrants of the ChangeGrid. So if we're looking at the 16 energies, some of these competencies fall very nicely into the expressive driver energy. Some are more amiable driver, some are driven expressive, and some are even an analytical expressive. So, but most of them are out here in these 3. So this is the general area where emotional intelligence either naturally exists or comes to the forefront when someone finds themselves in this particular area on the ChangeGrid. So let's just kind of look here for these curved lines on the composite so that you can kind of get your bearings on this. Now I'll go to the labels for the engagement rings in just a second, but starting at the highest point on the ChangeGrid, this band, if you will, between these 2 swooping arcs, this ranges from hyper awareness down to hypo awareness. And there's a little bit of early stage awareness happening more mid power here. Now, as we start to move a little bit further out grid between this arc and that arc, this is where a real awareness kinds of lives. And we have up-grid awareness, we have mid-grid awareness, we have down-grid awareness. As we step further out grid, this next little band on the engagement rings is where we would find intentions. And so there's up-grid intention, mid-grid intention, and down-grid intentions. intention has to lead to some sort of activity. And so the next little band we would reach would be on actual engagement, actively doing those things that you intended to do. And so we still have a little bit of upgrid, relatively upgrid engagement. And there's a distinction to be made about relatively downgrid engagement. And if you go all the way outgrid, you'll find execution. Part of execution falls in this little more healthy area of the change grid before we get into the danger zone, but a lot of execution ends up being in the danger zone. So with that as the overlay, again, we can look at it layer by layer to figure out what all lies. But if we try to go like, well, wait, where does emotional intelligence actually live then in terms of engagement rings? And the answer would be um, a little bit of this upgrid awareness moving towards mid-grid awareness, upgrid intention and mid-grid intention, and upgrid engagement and a little bit of mid-grid engagement. That's where we would see. So if I show you these little 4 sub-quadrants, and then you just look at these arcs, you can see it's going to be in this a bit of awareness, a lot of intention, and a good chunk of engagement as well. So does that resonate with what we know about emotional intelligence competencies? So when you are utilizing emotional intelligence one way or another, do you believe you are more likely to be in upgrid situations or downgrid situations? So where does emotional intelligence become most valuable, in upgrid situations or downgrid situations? What would you guys say?
I would say upgrade.
More upgrades.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
and why would you throw out? Why would you guess that if I'm in a somewhat upgrade? Now, again, I'm not way up in stress. I'm not in a flight kind of a situation, but nevertheless, I'm relatively upgrade. And so, what kinds of things am I feeling, and why is emotional intelligence useful to me when I'm in those kinds of situations? You might want to throw out their
Well, you want
explanation.
to, at least from my perspective, understanding looking at the neuroscience of this, the limbic system is called the seat of the emotions because of all these pathways that are feeding the emotions.
Mhm,
So, in
mhm.
other words, in the limbic system, some of the major structures, you have the hippocampus, which is long-term memory. So you have the amygdala, you have the hypothalamus and thalamus. So these are things that regulate heartbeats and your blood. So as soon as something triggers, all of those sensations are happening,
Mhm.
right? So unless you actually pause for a moment and take note of what's
Right.
going on in my environment, what's going on with me internally, um, you're just going to react instead of actually responding. And I think
Right.
downgrade, you'll be more just trying to ignore it.
Yeah, you could be very complacent, ambivalent, assume everything is just fine. But see, you brought up a very interesting point, and that is that something is happening in our environment that
Mhm.
I need to one way or another cope with or take advantage of. There's something that is compelling me to interact. And that's what we're looking at. So yeah, we're not being reactive like we would be way up in stress. We are trying to be a bit more responsive, a bit more interactive, and ultimately, if we're going to be down towards the bottom area of this little 4 subquadrant thing we're looking at, now maybe we're being a little bit proactive. So there's more of a sense that we are using emotional intelligence as a way to gain control over a situation, some way to get out of that reactive state more into simply active or even proactive. So we're gaining some sort of control. We're resolving whatever the issue is. We're dealing with whoever and whatever is going on. So can you guys sort of feel that that's when emotional intelligence is really being summoned as a valuable skill set? You guys agree,
Y-
disagree?
Yes, I
Yeah.
agree.
Because if I'm down here in power apathy or apathy, where there are no puzzles and there are no challenges and there are no conflicts, there's a whole lot of not much really going on. Well, maybe the aspects of emotional intelligence that apply to management of self, um, could be useful, because I do think downgrid, you're going to find boredom, and you're going to find depression, and you're going to find detachment, not emotional detachment, but detachment from other people, detachment from activities, that sort of a thing going on. And maybe there's some work to be done there that would tip its toe into the realm of emotional intelligence. But most of the things we're reading and understanding about these models of emotional intelligence tend to resonate right there. So again, a lot of it has to do with becoming aware of something in your environment that would benefit from some attention being paid to it, formulating and following through on some sort of intention, and maybe on the most outgrid aspects of it, actually executing or engaging in the doing of whatever it is that really needs to be done. Certainly someone who is an expressive driver has a lot more activity going on than someone who is an analytical expressive. They're further outgrids. So there's a higher level of drive. There's more of a focus on accomplishing something, that driver energy moving into the primary spot. Lots of things are happening. So there you go. So I don't remember who asked the question about how engagement factors in to that, but just for the corollary, those bands continue downgrid, but downgrid awareness, downgrid intention, and downgrid engagement is not something that requires a high degree of what I would say, demonstration of emotional intelligence, behaviors, competencies, etc. It just doesn't. And if you want to review the engagement rings, I'm happy to do that. But I think you guys get it. So, all right. So does that?
So T,
Yeah, go right ahead, Chris.
so what are your thoughts about the outgrid areas? The not the outgrid, I'm sorry, the danger zones. Isn't there a case for and a benefit for emotional intelligence for those areas, because
Oh,
since they're the most extreme?
as a remedy for whatever's going on. Like certainly the person who is living in the outgrid danger zone, and again, we're talking, that would be a very extreme situation. I don't want to say those situations don't exist, because I think I've met my fair share of clients who live and breathe every moment in this outgrid danger zone, and they're a trouble to themselves, and they're trouble to everyone around them, and their lawsuits waiting to happen, and this is not a good place to be. Well, I would suggest to you that this person that far outgrid is very much lacking in the emotional intelligence competencies, and or they have chosen to set them all aside. So remember, a great deal of what falls into the realm of emotional intelligence is stuff that we've all been taught as we were raised by many people who influenced our lives in developmental sorts of years. And so a great deal of what is emotional intelligence, everybody knows. The question is, are you going to employ it or deploy it when it is actually useful to you? People in the outgrid danger zone may be fully trained, if you will, in emotional intelligence. In fact, I would imagine corporations have spent a fortune trying to boost the emotional intelligence of their leadership teams. Only to discover that lo and behold, they always had those learnings. They've just selectively chosen what to apply, when to apply it, and when to simply set it aside and say, I no longer care. I don't need to be emotionally intelligent. I'm in charge. So certainly the remedy would be some sort of work around developing more emotional intelligence, or a greater level of expectation for someone to utilize their emotional intelligence. But yeah, did that answer your question, Chris?
Yeah, it did. I mean, I've been thinking about return to office and putting some energy and thoughts around it, because a lot of organizations are returning to office,
Yes.
and just seeing how far outgrid I think people are going to be. I mean, from relationship tension and task tension, because you're taking them from a situation where they become comfortable in, and now you're pulling them out of that world and throwing them back in. I could just imagine how much a refresher of emotional intelligence is going to be needed.
Yeah, I think there's going to be quite a little market for retraining in that subject matter. But again, we always have to say, how does this apply to what we know about the ChangeGrid intention management? And what I would be saying is, look, giving people training in emotional intelligence may not change much of anything,
Mhm.
because it isn't about having emotional intelligence or having these competencies available to you in your toolbox. It's about utilizing them. And yeah, we did say there are some people that are by nature more emotionally intelligent, and by nature tend to live in these areas on the change grid where emotional intelligence naturally occurs. But they're not the problem. The
Yeah.
problem are the people in organizations who are, put in place any scenario you want, brutalizing others, being loud, outspoken, insensitive. I mean, what triggered the corporation into investing in training in emotional intelligence anyway? It wasn't these people who are already living it. It's the people who aren't living it. And so I would just say, yeah, if you want to put them through the training, you go right ahead. But putting them through the training guarantees nothing in terms of true behavioral change. So, what do we really
Mhm.
need to do if we really want to have true behavioral change? We need to make sure that there is some sort of ongoing coaching, expectations being put in place, someone being assessed based on their utilization of these skills, being taken to task for any conduct violation. I mean, that's what I think is really going on. So go ahead and comment on that, Brian.
Yeah,
Or
I was gonna say that I think along the same lines with what Chris is talking about, and David probably can speak to this in the HR work, isn't there a difference between those who like really signed up for that training, like they feel like they can engage because they want to immerse themselves in the learning, as opposed to those who are actually forced to go to this training under the, the
Mhm.
pretense that, oh, we're going to motivate our people, and it turns out to be the exact opposite. They're not motivated, because think about, the Gallup statistics all the time in terms of states of work. 80% of the American workforce is disengaged or
Yeah,
dissatisfied with their work. Well, engagement starts on a personal level, does it not?
exactly right. Right. And true engagement exists in a very narrow band on the change grid. So the vast majority of the change grid is disengaged one way or another. So if you look even at the engagement rings, well, you want me to be engaged, look where I need to be. I need to be out here in this driver quadrant where I'm, I mean, I'm driven enough to want to go and do the tasks that need to be done. So how many employees are actually already there by nature there? And yeah, execution can be a good thing, but there are a few out there that are kind of like really pushing hard for out there. But look at what a tiny part of the map those two bands cover. So intention is a great step towards engagement. It all sounds really good. And how many people inside of a corporate setting or any kind of a setting, family setting, talk a really good game about what they're going to do and why it's so important to do it and all the benefit, but they never follow through and do it. So we all know that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Well, look at that, the amount of real estate that intention covers. And I can't formulate an intention until I'm aware of something that's going on. So there's a whole lot of people coming to work every single day that are fully aware of what's going on. They see it, they see the opportunities, they see the problems, they see the whatever, but for whatever reason, they don't even bother formulating an intention to do anything about it. So even downgrade, let's go downgrade, downgrade awareness. The person would say, and I'll put on some downgrade energy for you. The downgrade person would say, yeah, X is happening. I'm aware that X is happening. And now move it up to a downgrade intention. Yeah, somebody someday should probably do something about that. And downgrade engagement, well, if you got any questions, I could answer them for you. But this is hardly the movers and shakers in an organization. And so I've just given you a rather long kind of glimpse into what the real problem is, but engagement is not a very common thing at all. And I wonder if we really did profile teams of people. Well, in fact, for all of you who've done group profiling, you know that regardless of what the activity list is, you're going to find a whole lot of plotting in awareness and intention, maybe even hyper-awareness, but awareness and intention. And you're going to be pleased when you see things falling into engagement. And, again, maybe happy, maybe worried, depending on where in execution they might be landing. So yeah. Now I'll give you something that came out of the paper today. Do people still have papers? Do those still exist? But the CEO of Morgan Stanley today went, I don't know who was interviewing him, where he was, but he basically said, if you can go out to eat, you can come back to work. So the Morgan Stanley CEO wants the New York City staff back in the office full time by Labor Day. At least he didn't say by Monday. And anyone who does not could face a salary cut. So now imagine that's a rather strong outgrid sort of statement. I don't know about, I didn't hear it, so I don't know how he packaged the whole thing. So for all I know, he was too far outgrid for it to be packaged and presented in a responsible, emotionally intelligent way. But you can imagine that a whole lot of people are not happy about whatever it is he wants them to do, even if it is, you got, the whole summer to get your act together.
T, I think that's why the question Chris posed is so relevant, because, whether leaders understand that or not, that is a difficult transition for folks, and there are psychological implications to that. Yeah. And when you factor in, what may be happening for folks, as Brian says, at that personal level, yeah. And Brian's absolutely right. When we have training that is forced upon employees, the level of engagement is just extremely difficult. But I think part of the answer and what would help in that process is for companies to really engage their EAP programs and make sure that those programs are known and available to those employees as they transition back into the environment, because they're going to be dealing with a whole lot.
Absolutely right. Yeah. Now, Tim, maybe you know the answer to this because you've got such a background in HR, but who inside of the organization generally is the one who hires someone to do emotional intelligence training? Is that coming out of the C-suite? Is that coming out of where's that coming from?
Well, it's typically going to come from the leaders of T&D, their training and development organization. But if, what determines whether or not they've chosen that as an option depends upon what type of model are they using. Are they using the ADDIE model, or how do they determine it's appropriate to do training?
Yeah, see, I bring that up only because I know that in the kinds of training that I've always offered, sales and leadership training, usually the principal influencers and decision makers for those kinds of trainings tend to be further up in the organizational chart. So C-suite people, directors of sales, directors of marketing, VPs of this or that. Certain subjects, certain training subjects are driven by different sections or different segments of the hierarchy. And I always wondered, is the C-suite saying we need emotional intelligence training? Is that who's saying
that? Not likely.
Right. I'm thinking like the legal department might be saying it, or HR obviously might be very much strongly advocating for it. So. Okay. Anywho, that was my attempt to answer the person's question about how engagement overlays on it. Any other comments you guys want to make about engagement and emotional intelligence? This would, by the way, say that people with strong emotional intelligence are more likely to be engaged than people who are not. Right? If you think about where you see these bands for, and I'm going to even go like awareness, because we've got about knowing about something. So this idea about being self-aware and aware of others, this is the first step in any kind of change process that might be going on. It now leads to some sort of an intention, and that intention should be formulated with emotional intelligence principles and competency strongly in play. And then we got to get out there and do the work. And if you're going to be doing the work, engaging that, and a little bit of execution might be good to be emotionally intelligent while you're doing that. So I do think that there's a wonderful resonance between these two layers. Yeah. Okay. Any other
Hey,
comments, thoughts about that? Yeah,
yeah,
go ahead, Chris.
quick question. So every time we have these conversations on emotional intelligence, I always get this strong pull from amiable. And I think it's because when I'm thinking about this, I'm feeling that there's a part of it where people are gravitating towards emotional intelligence to help a person with themselves. And then there's another part, which I think is the major part, is to help someone with themselves, but for the purpose of interacting and engaging with others.
Yeah, exactly. And even that's listed as the top two of these emotional intelligence competencies. I don't know if they're listed in this order for a particular reason, by the way. I've got no idea why they're in this order. But interestingly enough, those two are very much at the top of things. So we got to know enough about ourselves so that we can really interact more effectively with others. As far as the amiable energy is concerned, the amiable energy is while it may be a social energy, and it may be an energy that is more people focused than it is task focused, I want you to make a distinction between someone who is being amiable versus someone who is trying to persuade you, or someone who is being amiable versus someone who is being enthusiastic. Or a cheerleader. So you get the idea. Amiable energy doesn't have a whole lot of drive associated with it, and it doesn't have a whole lot of tension associated with it. So it's very caring, it's very supportive. It very much wants everybody to get along and everything to be pleasant and comfortable and respectful and all those wonderful sorts of things. But the amiable energy in and of itself is more of a stabilizing energy than it is an energy of transformation. So sometimes for us to go to the next level, we all have to be willing to go through a period of being uncomfortable in order to be comfortable later on. So in fact, that's one of the things we're talking about business development from building a career that matters. Are you willing, when it comes to building your own business, are you willing to go through what could be several years of being uncomfortable in order to be comfortable for the rest of your life? If you're not willing to go through a period of being uncomfortable, then in all likelihood, you're just going to stay kind of the way things are. Change has, always involves, change just disrupts things, disrupts the norm. Maybe that's pleasant, maybe that's unpleasant, but nevertheless, it's going to change things. Are you okay with that? So that's what. So the amiable energy would say, "Oh, let's just be comfortable. Let's just care about what we've got, etc." So more of a supportive, nurturing, stabilizing energy than it is an energy of transformation. Yeah. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that helped. That helped a lot.
Sometimes I just go off in tea land, and you never know. All right, let's take a look at these other five attributes here and see what's going on. So the next one was about emotional awareness of others. Awareness of others is about, so now think of these words, because we're going to go like, where do those live on the change grid? Where do those live in the change grid? So awareness of others is about perceiving, understanding, and acknowledging the way others feel. So although what you're looking on the screen says awareness of others, in their little, on that page that I sent you guys the link to, I'll throw it to the screen, it says emotional awareness of others. And even though their thing says self-awareness, it actually says emotional self-awareness. So I think for the sake of space, they've dropped that word emotional out of there. So just assume that it's emotional intelligence. So all these things are focused on the emotional side of things. Chris, did you just raise your hand?
Yeah, I hit it by mistake. I was
Oh, I
checking
was
the
gonna say.
chat. Where did you said you sent that over?
Oh yeah,
And
but
via
I'll
chat?
chat. Yeah, I'll chat it over again for
All right,
everybody. You
thank
guys
you.
should all see it in your little chat window. Yeah, down below. Okay, anyway, emotional awareness of others. So the way others feel. This skill helps us identify the things that make people feel valued, listened to, cared for, consulted, and understood. It also helps us demonstrate empathy, anticipate responses or reactions, and adjust our behavior so that it fits well with others. When we demonstrate the skill effectively, we come across as being empathetic. People who do not demonstrate the skill can come across as being insensitive to the way others feel. Now, with that as a little set of descriptors, where do you think that lives on the change grid? And, specifically, which of these 4 subquadrants?
Sounds like the amiable driver.
It's an amiable driver. Very much. I don't know that I heard anything in that description that doesn't fall into the category of amiable driver. Now, it does say awareness of others. And I would like to point out that the thing, if we're going to be really strict about that subquadrant, awareness, we're past awareness. Awareness is this band. To be the exact center of the change grid, that's definitely all about awareness of what's going on in the world around us. It's even the awareness band. But I'm thinking that because it's about interaction, we got to take a little tiny step out grid. And that means I've had a bit of an intention coming into the play. Now, it might be very early stage intention being formulated, but I still read this, I go, they feel valued, listened to. So I might say that,
Hey, T, you're breaking up pretty bad, T.
am I? I don't know what to do. It says our internet connection is unstable. Let me just
it's like
check.
we're hearing every third word.
Okay. Is it better now? Let's see. Yeah, I don't know what to say about that, guys. Let me switch to a different one of our routers. So you guys just stay put for a second, and let me just switch routers and see if this helps. One moment. Okay, that switched the router. Can you guys hear me? Somebody needs to say something. Hello? Oh, am I unmuted? There I am. One moment. Okay, I'm going to unmute. One moment, please. Oh, are you guys back?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yep.
You can hear
Sound
me.
good.
Good. All right. Yeah, I switched routers. We have in our house, we've got 3 different routers we can lock into, and maybe we're just having problems with one of them, but hopefully this will be better. Anywho, I don't know what I was saying where you got when it kind of cut out or whatever, but what I was saying was that I believe that there is an intention that's being formulated, or an intention that's being lived when we start to move into and behave in ways that are in this emotional intelligence kind of realm. Does that work for you guys?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, where it comes to where does insensitivity live? Well, we could certainly say that there's a difference between being insensitive. If I'm being outright insensitive, where do you think I am on the change grid? I'm being consciously, deliberately, outright insensitive.
Outgrid.
Outgrid danger zone.
Outgrid danger zone. I'm being the bull in the china shop. Now, what if I'm just being accidentally or unintentionally insensitive? I could be where on the change grid?
Downgrid.
Downgrid. I could even be a little bit where?
Ingrid.
Upgrid, a little bit ingrid, because as I move upgrid, ingrid, or downgrid from there, things start slipping out of my awareness. And so I think that that's a very important thing. To be intentionally insensitive is a very different perception than, okay, if I'm in a business, if I'm in a corporate setting and I think that people are being insensitive, there's a difference if I think of them as being clueless versus being deliberately insensitive. And yeah, I would react differently because of that. Thoughts?
Yeah, I agree.
Yep.
I agree.
All right, let's take a look at the next one. Authenticity. Yeah, Edie, do you want to throw something in?
I was just thinking, I think there's a point where clueless, that it can be intentional. And then it goes on a continuum to a point where people are clueless.
And so do you think I'm being artificially clueless? I'm just faking that I'm clueless to feign ignorance? So I guess I'm saying is there a calculated element to that, or is it just,
or is it,
yeah, go ahead.
I'm just thinking of a guest I have right now, and it doesn't even bother me because she is so nasty to the point that it's almost entertaining. So I'm just thinking, is she clueless, or is she, it's unbelievable. It's,
Yeah.
So I don't know. What?
Yeah. Well, she
is
could
there
just
a
be
point
very,
where it becomes one and the same?
yeah, well, I think you're right. I think a lot of it has to do with conditioning. A lot of it has to do with what, how long have people been letting her get away with those behaviors that now she just assumes everyone will accept it and deal with it. So, where are boundaries, etc. So she could simply be very downgrade about the whole thing. She could be upgrade, but in order to be upgraded would mean she would have to be so distracted by other things that are competing for her attention that she simply is exhausted. So yeah, is that what's going on? Yeah.
And it's interesting to me that I don't buy in. So, I said, are you going to leave Thursday? And she's like, I'm not talking to you about this. And I'm like, okay, I just wanted to be sure. I'm going to take a swim. And it's almost like I aggravate her more because I don't buy in, and I go on my happy way singing a happy tune to the lake. You know what I mean?
Yeah, good for you. Good for you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Interrupt the pattern. Got to interrupt the pattern. So, and the thing is that I know this is just in my own operations because we have some people, in fact, over this weekend, we went out for brunch or whatever, and we have some friends in our life, love them as people, but they have certain behaviors that to me are no longer something I want in my reality. And I don't mind calling them out on it, and they can count on me to call them out on it. And so we tend to live with this thing, and I'll just share, this is personal. I'll be curious to know how many of you resonate with this, but we each have only one life to live, and none of us know how much of it remains. So I want to fill every moment I have every single day with as much joy as I can. So I don't need other people's crap into my reality. And when they're complaining about something, it's kind of like, you do know that you have a choice in this whole thing. It's like, oh, anyway.
And does that become a shift? Like, I'll give you an example. So when they came, and I felt the same way, T, it's like, I'm not that desperate for your money. And I kind of politely said, you know what, this isn't going to work. It's not a fit. It's not what you wanted. I will refund you the money and I can open up the account. You know what I mean? And then all of a sudden they back off. So there's a dynamic shift on the grid, isn't there? As soon as someone,
Yeah, because now they have to be more aware of what's going on.
Yeah.
And instead of, so that could all, of course, we believe everything can be explained on the change grid. You just have to stop for a moment and go like, wait, what's really going on when it comes to this dynamic? Because there's a spot on the change grid for every possible behavior a human can exhibit. I don't care how heinous the behavior is. I don't care how psychologically unstable the behavior is. It has a place on the change grid where it most naturally occur. And that's what I'm saying. People go like, oh, he'd never heard a fly. Really? I can tell you places on the change grid he definitely heard a fly. So, it's all on here somewhere. So where does your crazy tenant live on the change grid? Obviously, I'd have to have more experience to know, but you could probably just sit down and go like, nope, I get it.
And this is a whole nother topic that we might cover, is the influence of a spouse in some of this. Because I almost get the feeling he's got to be gruff with me because she's looking at him like, you sig her. And then I come off nice and I soften him, and that irritates her too. So I find it interesting how, healthy and unhealthy relationships.
I love it. What you're doing is turning your life into a lovely white paper. And so that's all. Just document it. I'm very curious.
Yeah.
The whole thing, it's the laboratory of life. Okay, anyway, let's take a look at another one here. La 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 la. Authenticity. Authenticity is about openly and effectively expressing oneself, honoring commitments, and encouraging this behavior in others. It involves honestly expressing specific feelings at work, such as happiness and frustration, providing feedback to colleagues about the way you feel, and sharing emotions at the right time, to the right degree, and to the right people. People high in authenticity are often described as genuine, whereas people low in the scale are often described as untrustworthy. Alrighty then. So where on the change grid are you most likely to express yourself openly and effectively, honestly, about your feelings? It doesn't really seem to be talking about your more concrete opinions about things. It seems to really be focused on expressing your emotions around that.
Expressive driver.
The expressive driver
Yeah,
would be doing it, maybe a little bit of the amiable driver. I guess it depends on what the emotion is that you're expressing. Maybe even a driven expressive
Mm.
could do that. So it's in this realm. And I guess if we said where exactly it falls would probably be influenced by the specific emotion you are sharing. Like, for example, if I'm sharing it, the two he gave is happiness and frustration. Happiness and frustration do not live at the same place on the change grid.
Mm.
So, where am I frustrated? I'm frustrated, but I feel like I'm being held back by something or another. That may fall in a very different place, more of an upgrade sort of a thing. Frustration may be than happiness. Happiness might be more of an amiable driver kind of a thing. So I think we'd have to be more specific around that. Now, the question that I have around this is that if it's all about expressing emotions, what are they saying about people who, for whatever reason, don't really live in that emotional state? So, for example, I'm fascinated by people who display emotions. By Myers-Briggs, I'm an INTP. I scored 0 on F when it came in there because I don't understand why people get upset about things. I can't relate to that. So intellectually, I understand that it's because of whatever their makeup happens to be, but I don't understand the useful, practical benefit of being upset about something. So am I in some way or another less intelligent because I can't really relate to that? Or might I still be intelligent enough if I can at least be aware of it, observe it, and even talk to somebody about it, even if I don't personally experience it? That was a
Yeah,
lot. So
you
someone
just
be my
have
therapist.
different whenever they're studying emotions.
Mhm.
Remember the Latin root for the word emoto means movement. So just like there's a threshold, we all have different what they call set points and orientation when it comes to
Mhm.
emotion.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
the event itself, and again, I think Boris had talked about that, or that was part of his question, is it's very situational, it's very contextual, and they tend to, when you talk about these feelings or emotions in general, they tend to be temporary, like they pass on. So people that are always angry, they're just reprising the event
Yeah.
over. The
Yeah. Yeah.
event
Yeah.
has passed on, but they have not.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Interesting. Well, you know
Hmm.
what? The other explanation could be that because I've been taking antidepressants for decades,
Hmm.
they may actually finally be kicking in. And so, when you're taking I'm not taking is it NRSI, SRNI? What is it? A serotonin,
SSRI,
an SSR. I'm taking an SNRI.
right.
Yeah, mine affects also norepinephrine. And so as a result, I'm kind of more in the center of the change grid, which on the one hand is a wonderful place to be because you don't get pulled into all this other emotional ick that's happening hither and yon. But there's also kind of like a flattening of your range of experiences, emotional responses to things, kind of a flattening. Yeah.
That's why a lot of bipolar people will not take their meds because they really miss the emotional surge that they get in their
Mhm.
manic phase.
Yeah.
They're addicted to it. Literally, you can't, and they refuse to take meds, and that's a big problem.
Hmm.
But the other thing I'm wondering, T, and there's two things. One, I have a client who I see her as a problem solver. I mean, dad abandoned her, mom's crazy. It's just, and she's doing well. But she has a problem solving approach to, like, if I couldn't, do the Bluetooth with the I watch her and she has a problem solving approach. So the guy where she's staying for as parents, whatever. So anyway, he was saying that these people probably can deal with situations that would drag other people down emotionally because they look at their depression or whatever as a problem to solve. And I'm wondering if you do that, you can look at it more objectively and say, why is everybody getting so upset? This is what we need to do. Yeah. But the other thing I'm wondering, in the 60s and 70s, Fritz Perls, Moreno, all of the therapies seem to be very much about catharsis. So I'm just curious with you, where does the catharsis come? If catharsis is that essential in therapy and healing? I'm just curious. It's an interesting.
Because I have no idea. I mean, there's really nothing that's been going on in my life for as long as I can remember that I would have any legitimate reason to feel much of anything about, other than it just is what it is. Now, I will say that one thing that I just want to do, like even at this little brunch we were at, it's kind of like, if there was an SSRI that actually had an immediate effect, I would drop it in everybody's drinking water. Because I'm listening, all my head can say is, you people need a pill, because there is nothing in the actual situation they're talking about that warrants the response they're having. So it's totally disproportionate to what's going on. And so we know what happens if you move too far up grid. Reality gets distorted. Lord knows, actually, Lord and Brian knows what's happening when it comes to neurotransmitters. So that's not helping the situation. Or they get very aggressive. There's a lot of outgrid kind of, it's like, people take a pill. So
yeah, but see, that behavior is the pill.
Well, exactly. That's the whole point. They're somehow or another. They're benefiting from this release. I just personally find it, oh my goodness, I almost said I actually find it annoying.
Yeah, it can be disturbing. Really.
So I am annoyed by something.
Yeah, because it creates these conditions that you're just, oblivious to, like totally unaware of. Because my way of processing fear, apparently, when I was studied in a laboratory, is to, instead of running away from it, I walk to it.
Oh.
So my way of processing fear is, let's get it over with sooner than later. And so, that's just the way that I do. So I'll jump in and scared as hell doing so, but I jump in and just work to try to figure it out because I want it over sooner than later.
Well,
but Brian, that's just,
he'd be very handy to have. If we're going for a walk in the wilderness in Alaska, he'd be very handy to have with us if a bear comes across us. It's like, okay, Brian, you go do your thing.
But Brian, you have that same problem solving approach. You can get a distance and then you get leverage and a handle on it. You know what I'm saying? It's the same approach.
Yeah, and that's what the emotion does, though. Because think about it, the things that are close to us, and you probably know this from the NLP, the things that are close to us, we're going to give more attention to. In other words, it has more emotional power than things that are further away. So the emotions, again, is playing this whole holistic game that we're trying to piece together all in one moment. So because it's accounting for memory, it's accounting for what's going on with your body physiologically, it's accounting for all these things. So it's really tough to study.
Hey, T, I was just listening to what Brian was just describing today in the book The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. And he was talking about that ability to be the witness in those situations, because the thing that fear is afraid of is fear itself.
Interesting. Now, say a little bit more about that, because over the weekend, Chris did send me a little text about where on the ChangeGrid the untethered soul actually resides. And of
Yeah.
course, you put those two things together, untethered and getting a little bit more into the soul of things. That's a PowerPoint experience. As one rises off of the surface of their change grid and detaches from whatever's actually going on. I like that whole idea about it being you, or, you know, they can call it the untethered soul, but it's a lot of aspects of yourself that are now being untethered. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, and certainly that's where you become very observant about what's going on, which in turn, again, we go there, but we tend to be at the center of the change grid for very short periods of time, unless we've really developed a strong practice that enables us to remain there. And even then, it's not for prolonged periods of time. So we go there, we do what happens so beautifully there, and then we get back to the world of living. And so in Brian's example, all right, so he walks towards the fear. He is detaching himself in a certain way so that he can figure out what really needs to be done, and then he goes and does it. By then, I'm back at the truck, and he's talking to the bear. So,
Yeah.
But you know, the whole thing of detachment, how is that different than Buddhism? Isn't that pretty much the foundational thinking of Buddhism?
and so many other things. That's one of the things
Yeah.
we talk about as far as, is there a single PowerPoint experience? We talk about the consulting the oracle of the self. We talk about being in this centered point. I think that if you look over the history of, I would say, philosophy, religion, psychology, just whatever behaviors, different cultures tend to turn into traditions and all that, it all goes back to this. So yeah, Buddhism is great, but we could call it something else if we were in a different kind of a culture. And it's just different descriptions of the exact same experience. And then of course, people get into trying to explain how that's happening or what's going on. And so some
Mhm.
cultures would say, now you are communicating with the spirit world. You're no longer part of this world. Now you're part of like the grand realm of deities. You are returning as a fiber to the robes of great spirit. And others would kind of go like, oh no, you've just decided to turn off your emotions, or oh look, lo and behold, serotonin is kicked back in. So, you know, some people have got very practical explanations for how this centered experience comes to be, and other people imbue it with a lot of wonderfully poetic and visually rich sorts of explanations. So, hey, well, you know what? Whatever works.
Where would this be on the change grid? So many people, like this woman, but others, use anger as a power control lever, right? Okay. Yeah. And so and the fact is, if I'm really angry with you, T, the automatic response in most people is, oh my God, what have I done wrong? I mean, it's amazing. It's a real stimulus response.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me explain that by looking at,
Where?
it's on the dark side of the change grid. And so you're
Okay.
talking about someone who is behaving in a very upgrid or outgrid way. Anger tends to be exhibited, either someone is very upgrid, because remember, anger and pain walk hand in hand. So anytime someone becomes physically, emotionally, or intellectually injured, they will respond with anger, but that's an upgrid response. And other people will use anger as a tool that's more of an outgrid type of anger. Well, it is not at all surprising to notice or to discover, to watch someone who is in the outgrid danger zone, when confronted about their behavior, suddenly becomes an in-grid danger zone response. So the perpetrator's immediate reaction to confrontation could include positioning themselves as the victim. So
Interesting.
right. And so yeah. So I think that's true as we move all around the change grid. You have to always keep in mind that all four danger zones, when we depict this in 2 dimensions, a normal change grid arrangement, they look like they're as far apart as things can get, when in fact they are all the exact same spot. So we have to be able to turn the change grid into a sphere for that to really become most evident, but those 4 danger zones are direct neighbors with one another. And it is far easier energetically to move from one danger zone to another, or bounce between these, randomly and quickly. That's a lot less energy than trying to move yourself to the center of the change grid, where you find full emotional stability and logical awareness and understanding. And that's work. It's so much easier to just jump from danger zone to danger zone to danger zone and never go through the healthier aspects of the change grid along the way.
Do you remember the drama triangle transactional analysis? Do you remember
Mm-hmm. In fact, I think we overlaid that on the change grid.
People go from victim to the, where they switch roles from.
Yes.
You think what? Okay. I mean, what you're saying really kind of pertains to the drama triangle, doesn't it?
Well, it absolutely does. And again, anyone who's working with people who've been abused, they know that one of the greatest concerns is that at a certain point in time, the abused is quite likely to become the abuser. In part because that behavior has been modeled for them, and so they duplicate what's been modeled for them. But along the way, they could also move up grid or down grid. There's lots of other emotions going on as well. So yeah, anyway, there you go. You can't be a perpetrator without a victim. You have to. I'm out there. I'm an abuser. Well, really, who are you abusing? So there's got to be somebody that's the object of whatever we're talking about there. Okay, I'm still getting messages about my internet connection being unstable today. Yeah, so I'll bet I'm still coming and going, aren't I?
Uh-oh.
But oh well, wait, am I still there? I'm here.
He's a goner, huh?
Okay, am I back? Am I back? Am I back? Am I back?
Or that, or maybe he's drinking.
No, am I back yet? Am I back? Oh man. Let's see what I can do.
Make him always.
Yeah, I can see that he stopped and he's coming back in, because now I see all your pictures.
Okay.
Okay, am I? Are you guys hearing me?
Yes.
Okay,
We hear you
good.
now.
So hopefully I can hear you now. Somebody say something.
Yes.
You're here.
Can you hear
You're
us?
here.
Yay, yay. All right, well, that's so weird, but it's the top of the hour. And so, oh, this is going to be a fun one to edit, let me tell you. Yeah, these are the things that drive me upgrade. Why can't technology be 100% reliable? Oh, but there you go. All right, so I guess on Thursday we'll finish this up. I'm glad we're having all these discussions. Hopefully you guys are finding it also useful to you. We just always have to remember that the reason why we're doing these exercises in the circle of brilliance is we're trying to figure out, does integrating emotional intelligence into the change grid help our understanding of the change grid, and in turn our work with our clients? And for people who have a background in emotional intelligence, does understanding the change grid help them in some way do their work more effectively? I believe the answer for this is yes, in both cases. So emotional intelligence is something that's well worth integrating into our understanding of tension management. You guys agree? Comments? Thoughts?
Yes.
Yes, I agree.
Absolutely, T.
All right. So see if you can apply that, Edie. See if you can work with your crazy tenant there.
I'm just kicking him out.
We'll see. But what do
That's
you
a problem-solving approach, by
It's
the
a
way.
very problem-solving approach. It's good to have boundaries. Good to have boundaries. Okay,
Hey,
well,
didn't you say you have there's a ChangeGrid professional that's certified in emotional intelligence?
yeah, but that's Jody Charlap, and actually there's a couple of others, but Jody is in the Atlanta area, and they do a lot of work with a lot of clients, but she's kind of told me she's busy on Tuesdays and Thursday mornings. So morning our time, so early afternoon your guys' time. So she's just never able to make these, but she does listen to the recordings.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so it'd be great to be able to get her on. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anything else before we go?
No, thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.